Um, Good morning. This is the November 19th Outreach and Advocacy Committee meeting with the State Board of Education. And I'm thinking today our agenda, we can possibly be brief, but wanted to circle back if there were any testimonies that you all feel, it's been at least a couple of months that we've processed testimony. And seeing if there was any that we needed to do anything with. So, discuss any testimony that we need to do any action steps. I did want to talk about the parent council and if we have a target month that we wanted or we think might be good to enroll or go down that do that venture related to, I think we were taking the stance of what does parent engagement look like? And that will be kind of the purpose of our council. And then I did want to wrap with, what should next steps be with safe passage, and especially given in light of the wonderful reports that we heard from our, specifically our student advocate. I'm sure there's some overlap with our ombudsman, but also knowing that it's such a big issue that, we probably want to be kind of realistic with our time and our resources to know like what immediate steps, because that work can pull us in a variety of directions. All right, so with all that said, in regards to testimony, any thoughts, feedback from the last couple of months of any testimony that resonated? I do know the one parent who testified related to apps and that information, John Paul, and privacy worries. John Paul circled back with DCPS. We got some answers about that. And then the teacher, teacher, the committee that Representative Sutter runs, all the names are run together. I think also put some assurances or questions, in the letter that we sent to the superintendent related to virtual learning. So that's kind of one that kind of stands out. I'm not sure if you all remember any testimony that you're like, did we do anything with that?
I would like to bring up something.
Okay.
The mayor has lifted the mask mandates. And this morning I was delivering books and a security guard came up to me because she knew me, I guess, and said, are the children going to have to wear masks on Monday? And it kind of struck me as a perfect example of how the information doesn't get to the people that need the information. And I think I'm again, I don't know why she's lifting the mask mandate, period. But could we advocate? I mean, I don't know how y'all feel about it, but I just don't think it's the time to lift the mask mandate coming into Thanksgiving and Christmas at all. And I think it's a really bad move, but I just wondering if that's something that would that fall under advocacy or outreach or outreach-cacy or something like that. Do you understand what I mean?
I do. Anyone have any thoughts?
So, I mean, I saw that the majority of the council members at this point have weighed in and are proposing legislation to do something different, which I think is the right call. As I understand it, the three who did not sign on, they did not sign on because they didn't agree with the complete reversal and that they wanted some exceptions. So like, I haven't been to the gym since COVID started, but it's kind of hard to work out in a mask. So they wanted exceptions like that. I have a feeling that as long as they stay together, they have a veto-proof majority and they will get what they want. So yeah, I mean, like, I do think, I mean, I don't think it hurts us to weigh in if the board as a whole sees it as something we should weigh in about. I saw Alex put in the chat that masks will still be required regardless of vaccination status. I think The concern that I've heard though is just more generally outside of schools and education facilities. What does this mean for those who are under 5 who still can't be vaccinated? And then we have such a slow uptake in parts of the city like I live in, with vaccinations, period, from 5 all the way up to, I don't know. I don't know anybody that's 500, but you know what I'm saying. So those would be
Birth to
my
forever.
thoughts.
Yeah. My immediate thoughts were it's going to cause some confusion. Just kind of with exactly what we're seeing. Like, we know that they're still required in schools. But I know, like, walking through my middle and high schools, it's already an issue before, this let's take them off happened, so just kind of the confusion of like, oh, I have to wear it in school, but I don't have to wear it anywhere else. I'm also worried. I don't want to revisit when we took off masks a little early last time and we ended up with community spread, especially knowing that we're hitting a period where we're going to be indoors versus if we, waited till a time that we might be a little outdoors. So I just, we testified back in May that, we knew masks were kind of keeping case counts down. And then when school's time came around for reopening, it was like, our numbers were up, and I just don't want to revisit, just the wreck that the pandemic has had on keeping schools. I mean, schools are open, but effectively educating without the constant interruptions of who has to go home, who has to quarantine, do we have enough staff, are the staff well? Then yeah. So in regards to our efforts, I mean, I'm not sure if you all wanted, if there's anything. I was thinking like maybe a different route of like, could we do like cool PSA videos or
I'm just thinking
Like,
the
yeah.
immediacy of it.
But Fraser, are you wondering, I mean, I guess I'm curious to know what your main concern is. Is it that folks are confused about whether they have to wear masks in schools? Like, are you thinking that we would advocate in the sense of like distributing information? In which case,
I mean,
yeah.
the folks, the people that I'm just talking about a couple of people, but I also know that if someone's asking that question, then the message didn't get out. A message got out, but it wasn't a clear message. And it's not a clear message really, because it says schools have to be mass places. But then, like, I think it was Carlene that said, or it might have been Ebony Rose, once you leave the building, take your mask off. And we're talking about students and the staff. I just think that we need to, I personally think we should put a letter out or put a something out to say how we feel about it. But I mean, and it has to come out now, like yesterday kind of thing. Is it?
Oh, you said
I
now.
mean, have you heard anything, Emily, from your constituents? I hate to use that word, but that's the only thing. The people.
The people.
Yeah.
Your neighbors.
Yeah, your neighbors.
My widespread neighbors. Now I have more neighbors now. I just learned. I have not heard confusion about this, but often when I reach out, then people let me know that they're confused. They don't necessarily reach out to tell me they're confused about this kind of thing. And it is pretty new, but yeah, not yet.
But it's Monday when it starts. It's
Yeah.
the day after tomorrow. And I mean, I know the count. I mean, I'm really pleased that the council is against it, and that they're going to vote on it today, I'm sure, because this is the last day they're going to vote until Monday. But I mean, I don't, because we've been very proactive rather than reactive as a board this year. And I think that we should be saying what we think about this very, very important, life-threatening decision.
I know you want to do it like tomorrow,
No,
but
I want
I'm
to do
also
it today.
today.
Yeah,
Because I'm just wondering, like, is this an issue that we need the thoughts of other board members
yeah,
outside of?
definitely. No, I wouldn't, I'm not saying we should make the decision. I just think that, I don't know, I mean, John Paul would know more about this, the machinations of it, but I just, it's urgent. I mean, I'm always talking about emergency because no one thinks that this thing is an emergency. It's like, well, we're here, but it's not an emergency. It's an emergency. We're in an emergency situation in a lot of things in the schools, but especially this, because if you don't have the information, that's the worst kind of thing. I mean, that's what we've been fighting about, transparency. This is a very transparent decision. Okay, everybody doesn't have to wear their mask except the people in the buildings, in the school buildings. The office buildings have to wear, the people at the mayor's office that work with their constituents, that's in the that's what she said. They have to wear their mask, but you don't have to wear a mask where? Around other people? You
I know
still-
Ebony Rose came on and off mute a couple times. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so just go with me on this journey that's happening in my head. There are two buckets of things. One is, yes, there is confusion around what this means. And so we could, I guess, figure out if there are some ways to like make a quick, explainer video or put some more information out. Here's the thing though, if the council votes, and I don't know, I don't know if I don't think is it emergency legislation, John Paul, but like if the council votes next week, and something takes effect, then we would then be messaging something different right after. So there is I do worry about just our capacity to keep up with what is happening, given she put this out and given the council members overwhelmingly said that they share the same concerns. I don't think it would be a bad thing for us, and like we have done recently, to kind of weigh in and say, with the council, to say, hey, here's where we are on this. Here's why this is good or bad for children, and like that type of thing. Yes, like some type of statement to them, because I suspect that the council is going to overturn this. Yeah, I mean, it won't be in effect by Monday because they can't put it into effect by Monday, but it will happen in rather short order.
If they vote today, that could happen.
But I don't think they can
Couldn't
vote
happen, John
today.
Paul? Okay, I'm glad. Okay, I'm just asking for your counsel
yeah.
on this.
Yeah, the council doesn't vote unless it's a legislative meeting, and they don't have one scheduled today.
Oh, there isn't a meeting today.
No,
There are meetings, they're just not legislative meetings.
they're committee meetings, just like ours are.
Committee meetings, yeah.
Yeah.
So where do they vote?
I mean,
I think it's aren't legislative meetings typically on Wednesdays, John Paul?
Tuesdays.
Tuesdays, okay.
Emily,
Where
oh,
did they
I was
vote?
just gonna say, I mean, I think at this point, echoing what, the concerns are, is probably a good idea, but in what form, I guess, is this something we just post on social media? In terms of actually being helpful, maybe at this point, the thing to do is for members to share with constituents in our various, through our various channels, just what the mayor is actually proposing. So it's not that you can not wear your mask at school, that's still something you need to do. And just, I mean, I think it's a matter of just like taking that list, this list here, and re-messaging it at this point, but also maybe with our concerns.
Yeah, and then I
Okay.
think for me, thinking about our equity framework, and I know we got a nice reminder, I think maybe our last retreat to remember that the equity situation or our equity framework exists on the board. I'm thinking, and this is my field, watching and living and, hanging out in my ward. Folks have embraced, the use of masks and the use of congregating more outdoors, more than the vaccination. So I know, there were some sentiments expressed, not from our board, but, leadership about, well, we can't, operate in like a vaccine, I can't remember what the statement was. It was something about basically like, raising, and raising the use of vaccinations, which is, yes, I think our general sentiment is possibly we believe that, but we know that our, not all of our neighbors feel as comfortable, as evidenced by the rates of vaccinations in my ward. But I do feel like masks have been the one thing that's relatively embraced. And so, how do we support people making that conscious decision of, maybe I'm not ready for the use of that medical procedure, but I'm okay with using what they feel is maybe less invasive as masking. So I'm just kind of trying to elevate the use of what we see. We're supposed to look at our equity framework, and we see that for some reason there are certain wards. We know it's not because of lack of access to vaccinations. It's a different choice. How do we support health through knowing what our numbers are? So I'm just kind of wanted to raise that. There's stuff going on in chat. All right, so I think we have next steps about
Thank you, John Paul.
yeah, that's fast. Next steps about thank you. That was kind of, I was worried, John Paul. I was like, I appreciate, Fraser, your push for like tomorrow, but I was also is kind of like, I know, our resources and our staff members, but it seems like John Paul and Alex, they are on it in regards to.
So y'all are so savvy that you're reading this stuff. I don't even know how to. I mean,
John Paul, you have your hand out.
So what I was thinking was if we can make it fairly simple, something like, we're concerned because we think that this will cause confusion. And we ask you, we think you should probably reconsider this decision until after the holiday season so that there can be more time for messaging, that type of thing. I think that's something that we might be able to get pretty quick unanimity amongst the board members to issue a statement like that. I do wonder, and I do want to be very cautious about the state board as an entity weighing in on public health issues, because we're not experts and we don't know. And although, yes, the mask mandates have been somewhat helpful, I think, in curbing some things, at the end of the day as well, the mandates haven't actually been shown from the research that I've seen to be incredibly helpful to reducing COVID spread. And so it is good and we should do it, but the vaccinations are the things that are actually going to help. So maybe we could actually add in something to say, in the interim, we urge the mayor to increase numbers of vaccination abilities and those types of things. And Alex makes a good point about, should we say a date certain? I was thinking till the new year. So
Yeah,
sometime in January, maybe rethinking this decision, but I'm also fine with whatever it is. I was just trying to find some language that we might be able to agree on, 1 or 2 sentences we could put out on social media fairly quickly and hopefully be able to get the 9 members of the board to also agree with.
Rep. Thompson.
So, I mean, I do think simpler is better. I am sensitive to the argument that like everything that affects kids is not in our purview. I get that, and I am pretty upfront when I talk about what expertise I do not have. There's no shame in my game around that. I do think at the same time though, there are some things. What that makes me think of is with the confusion and with us thinking about how are we able to communicate to our constituents, extended neighbors, whatever we want to call them, when things are happening and why things are happening. One of the things that I would appreciate from DC Health both as a elected official and just as a human living in DC, is if they could be a little more transparent about the metrics and like why and when we make decisions. Because you're right, we don't have that expertise, but it would be great if we could, if we were able to say, we're lifting this at this point because of this, we're reinstating this at this point because of this. I think that would also aid in helping a lot of the confusion and persuading people to do what we have been told has proven is best to mitigate the spread of COVID. But in the absence of that, I don't think it is, the absence of that adds to the further confusion and the increase of people not necessarily taking up the things that are available to them to prevent COVID spread.
Thank you, Rep. Thompson. Rep. Gazoy. Gasoy. Am I saying your name right? I listened to you say it during the outreach session on Monday, and I was like, I think I'm Southern in Gazoy, and it's Gasoy is how you pronounce it.
I pronounce it Gasway, and I don't notice when people pronounce it differently. And I realized just this, I'm at the end of my semester at Georgetown, and I realized I've been mispronouncing 2 students' names all semester because they introduced themselves to somebody else. But they told me the same thing. They're like, we don't even notice when you say it wrong. So I don't know. I think people who have names like mine, they just like get used to it. So you're fine. But it is Gasway if you want to. Okay. So onward. Rep. Thompson brought up something that I remembered. This is a segue, maybe, if you want, back to the original question, which is testimony that has sort of stayed with us. And one of the public witnesses that I have followed up with or tried to, I'm in progress, is the teacher who has been doing research on the DC Health, on the different sites that report out the data on, infection numbers and how there's not consistency across the 3 main platforms. And so actually Francisco, one of our fellows, has been reaching out to DC Health to try to get clarification on that. But I think it's related to what Rep. Thompson brought up about, the need for more transparency, because another piece of what that teacher is trying to figure out is, exactly what you just asked. I think it's both trying to get a sense of what the numbers really are, but the purpose of that is then to better understand, why are we doing what we're doing, right? And I think that's a good starting point in sort of getting a better understanding of what the rationale is behind what they're reporting. But I think that's a much bigger lift. Like that is sort of a long-term, they are, it's like the, or waiting signal on the computer. It's like we're still just waiting for them to get back to us. They said they'll get back to us. So we did get an answer, but it's like, we'll get back to you. So, but I think that is not a bad place to push, actually. So that's just kind of an ongoing advocacy push. And I know that the teacher has been in touch with council members as well. And has gained some traction with them and interest. And then, this is another place where, so I don't know if this is going too off on a tangent, but I did meet with the new legislative staffer from the deputy mayor's office. And she is interested in sort of hearing what our concerns are and what our priorities are. But I think this is a case yet again where the mayor has done something without making it clear why, right? Like, has she heard from DC Health? Is it something that she, is based on what businesses need? And so I think that kind of messaging could actually be helpful. And that's maybe feedback we can give to them is, or just inquire, like, what is this based on? So sorry, that was a little bit rambling, but I think that's all I have for now. I will stop.
Thank you. I would say like other testimony would have been stars, but I know our assessment and accountability group is really engaged in feedback and pulling together recommendations on that. So, all right. What is that? Okay. So if we are okay to move to the next topic, which is, what did I text y'all? Parent council. So I know to kind of pick, oh, hey, John Paul, go ahead.
Sorry, I just need clarifications. What are we doing? So are we doing a letter? Are we doing a statement? Are we asking the rest of the board members if they're interested in it? Like, I need some more guidance on what are we doing and when.
Yeah, I would imagine I don't feel comfortable without getting some feedback from other board members. I can imagine that they have the same sentiments, but I don't want to guesstimate that. So I would maybe, if you all feel comfortable, if we say like, hey, board members, we outreach advocacy discussed a point raised by Representative O'Leary related to the mask mandate. We want to do a letter. Maybe here's some sample language. Are y'all comfortable with this? And then people also could raise some perspectives that they might be hearing from their wards too. Okay, cool. So that's one thing. Cool. Repka Zoe, I know you raised a couple things. Was there anything you wanted to, do you feel like we need to take action on based on?
Oh, I guess I will just keep you updated on, you know, what we find out. As I said, it's in progress. You know, if there was anything more that this committee wanted to do, you know, we could talk about that, but just so you know, that's something that's in process and I can just report back on it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Alrighty, great. Thank you. So the parent council, we have identified, I think we are on this to pick up where we left off and not go backwards. We said we were going to do a
Very
council.
logical.
Yes. We're gonna do a council related on what does parent engagement look like, since that's within our scope of work. I want us to move forward with identifying what date range that might happen. And I'm guessing we're talking 2022 now, even though I really wanted to do it before the end of the year. But and how do we kind of pull like ideas about how we pull people together? Where should we introduce this? Those things. Rep, because I see your hand went up.
Yeah, so I don't know. I hope this doesn't register as going backwards, but I did do a sort of brainstorming outline of possible objectives, because I think one of my fears with this is that we assemble families. I mean, I'm not afraid that we will assemble families without knowing what the objective is, but I think we just really need to settle on that first. So I wanted to share that outline with you. I'm going to put it in the chat and we can kind of go over possible ways of framing this.
You want to share your screen?
Oh, sure. Yep, we could do that too. Can I do that? Oh yeah, it looks like I can. Okay, hold on one sec. Oh, it says I need permission. Alex or John Paul, can you give me? Okay.
You should be able to do it now. Let me know if you can.
I can. Okay. Okay. So, so I came up with 4 possibilities, but these are not exhaustive, obviously. You may reject all of these, but here's what I was thinking. So one thought would be to assemble an inquiry group around the standards that are part of ESSA. So they're federal standards, and OSCE has created guidelines for LEAs on that. So one option, if we decided to do that, would be to bring families together as sort of like a study group to look at what there's a lot of points that LEAs are supposed to, or ways that LEAs are supposed to be supporting parent engagement. So this is just one. There's also a whole nother section on funding that families are supposed to be informed about and advise on. So one thing we could do is choose a section or sections of these guidelines and have families come together from different wards to, study them, see if there are areas that they want to drill down on, and become sort of versed in this, and then go back to their school communities to try to build this up, or, improve what's already there, or if there isn't something there, to help create these conditions in their schools. Another option, so that would be very broad, or it would be maybe starting broad and having families choose like what to drill down on or focus on. Another option I thought could be to start with a focus point. So like if you notice here in the responsibilities that LEAs have, the last one here is to set up a LEA level parent advisory board. And so that's just one example. We could focus on any one of these, but here's just so you get a sense, here's the OSCE guidance on that. So for the purposes of developing, revising, and reviewing the parent and family engagement policy, the LEA may establish a parent advisory board. This board must be comprised of a sufficient number and representative group of parents or families served by the LEA. And something that I have noticed is that DCPS does assemble a family advisory board each year, but the feedback that I have gotten from families who have served on that is that it feels very perfunctory, and that, they give their feedback and it doesn't really go anywhere. So, and then also I am not sure if, to the extent to which charters have these advisory boards. It's not required, as you can see in the language, but I just think it's interesting, maybe, something for families to decide if they wanted to have that. So a possible objective here would be to bring charter and DCPS families together to work to develop an advocacy platform. And this would be, either around something they decide from this larger list of responsibilities, or, something that we've decided to bring them together around. So any thoughts before I move on, or questions about that?
I can't imagine. I have, I've never been around a school that had a really active PTA, much less anything else.
This is a little different, just so you know. I mean, that is something we could talk about too, but this is at the LEA level. So this is like the chancellor brings together
okay, but if
families from, yeah.
Yeah.
So
The chancellor has all of these different, they've had this since the
I know.
beginning of Michelle Rhee, where they have these platforms for parents and students, and it looks good on paper, but I know that it doesn't work at all.
Exactly. So that's the point, is
I was
does it make
thinking that
sense?
we needed
Yeah.
to, like, we had the little meeting on Monday, and we've got another meeting coming up at the Martin Luther King Library. And it's community based. I think we should work from the inside out rather than the outside in, to see who we get to. I mean, I would think that at the meeting on the Martin Luther King Library, that there should be some forms for people to fill out if they're interested in being part of an organization. But if you're going to leave it to the LEAs, I mean, when we talk about LEAs, we're talking about this huge LEA, and some of them are bigger than others, but really small LEAs. And it won't work, like, because you're going to have to work as LEAs, then you're working at it working with them as independent agencies rather than what I mean, since we're supposed to be in charge of all of the schools, so, or not in charge, but doing things with all of the schools, then we need to have something that's going to bring the schools together. And the problem with LEAs is DCPS is an LEA.
Right.
It's not Friendship Charter School. It's not.
Well, that is an
yeah.
LAA too. So that is another.
No, I know it, but it's
right.
not.
So
But it's,
I don't know if Friendship does have, something like this. But anyway, other thoughts? Thank you, Frisian. Yeah.
I'm inclined to feel the same way as so thank you for pulling together the options. I am inclined to think the same as Representative O'Leary, and I if I can pull some chairmanship authority, I like us to stick to our initial, and it was actually your initial idea though, around like what are like the stand, like what does meaningful engagement look like based on parent feedback, so that schools can follow the things that you reference here. So I'm kind of curious. So these reference numbers here, this is from the law, from ESSA, right? Does DC have any common ground or commonality that we say, and hey, LEAs, this is how you can address these sections of ESSA? Do we, or I don't know.
In the guidelines. So here, like,
We do have guidelines.
well, yeah, ASSE has guide. I mean, that's where I pulled this from, actually.
Okay.
So, and yes, they do sort of break it down somewhat, but I guess that's sort of what I'm suggesting is bringing families together from school communities, right? To talk about what does this look like in your school, or is it not happening at all in your school, right?
Yeah.
So that is the first option here, is like bring them together to sort of study this, and then think about how is it playing out in your school? And if not, where are the points where you feel like, you really want to focus, or do you want to what do you want to do about it, I guess? And then
Rep. Thompson has her hand up. I like the cross LEA approach though, that get people from both sectors or more sectors into the room. Representative Thompson.
I have a question. So what is the thought? I guess I was thinking of this initially as a permanent body of ours, kind of like the Student Advisory Committee is a permanent body of ours. I want to make sure I am following, because if we bring them together to say like, hey, is this happening? And then like almost make some recommendations, it starts to feel like a task force or something. Not to say that couldn't be their first order of business, but I think, and maybe it's because we haven't visited this in some time. I think in going backwards, I want to be clearer on what our purpose and our goals are. I do for this body, like, and I think so. Like this, I appreciate you laying this out, because it helps me ask. It helps me ask some questions. Like, it gives me something to respond to. I do think that, I will say, more of my initial reaction, I do think a cross LEA body is the right grain size for us, because we are the State Board of Education. Like we are, like it should be. I do think that representation across is important. I also don't think that there is another body like that. And I don't, I'm not interested in duplicating. And I get that DCPS could do something different. I'm also not convinced that we have the ability to police, making sure people do this at the LEA level, given it's not required. So therefore, my default would be, we should have our own body that's across LEAs, because I don't know who else would or could do that. And I would question if we would be able to make sure other people are doing or could do or do well their own bodies. I do. So that I guess that's my initial thought or my initial thoughts about this.
Rep. O'Leary, thank you,
I've
Representative.
got an
Thomas.
idea. EdFest is coming up in a couple of weeks. We could have a table that has like a questionnaire or some kind of a form for parents to fill out. I know it's virtual, but that doesn't, I'm sure there's some way to do that. To find out, because it has to start small and grow. We have no idea what the expectation is. There has to be an idea about what, okay, so you set up the vehicle, what are you gonna do with it? What are you asking a parent? I'm a parent, I'd like to be involved. What do you want me to do?
Yeah, well, I think that's what we're working out here. And I think
This is too
I
much.
like,
This is
I
too
like
much
your,
of verbiage.
oh yeah, this is for us, not for them. I'm not
Yeah, but
saying
it's too
this
much
is-
verbiage for me.
Oh, well, I can help.
And I'm an
I'm
English
hoping I
teacher.
can help. So I think I like the idea of maybe of asking families or having something for families to express interest, but I do think that you know, we would need to be really clear what it is we are able to do, what our capacity is, and also what it is they would find most useful, I guess. I mean, so I guess Rep. Reed, I wanted to clarify, are you saying you don't want to look at these other things? You want to stay here on the first one? Because I was going to, so the first.
Maybe our homework we need to read your, we need
Yeah,
to
so
chew on your document. But I do think.
There's three, actually.
Oh, okay. So we probably just need to read your document and think about, but I do think we need to realize, like, even listen to like the superintendent's confirmation. They want to do another parent council, even though I might try to figure out how we, or was a student council, something. I'm just like, can we streamline some of this? But you know, not my lane. But I'm trying to figure out like what, like if we do something, there's so many bodies that have an opportunity for parents to provide feedback. And I probably said this already before. Parents have a lot of opportunities to provide feedback. It's about what's doing, like the happening. So people provide all these issues, and then you know they go monthly meetings, and then nothing happens. So I just want to, one, make sure our body is actionable, and then two, going back to the original talk about when we had this, was we were going to choose things that our parent council could actually act on. And granted, we probably won't be able to act on everything, but like, what could they act on related to the State Board of Education, so that it doesn't feel like they're bringing or, you know, participating in these conversations and nothing tangible is coming from it. And we landed on, for the most part, like parent engagement was something that we could move the needle on or provide guidance, because it's something that we vote on, it's in our purview, it's in our description. Now there's other issues too, possibly, but I was just kind of like, I just don't want it to be like we have a parent council for the sake of saying we have that engagement, and engagement is great, but I think people are getting to the point that they don't, time is precious and they want to see action. And it also makes it more meaningful because it's like they'll take seriously, hopefully, a parent council from the State Board of Education that actually gets things moving, or they see tangible.
Yeah, so I mean, that's a good point. This is actually, sorry for my spelling, it's embarrassing. This is actually in our purview, the standards. So it is added, like, yeah, maybe we should actually take up something that's in our purview.
And that's why I led this by saying, like, we kind of.
And I will say,
we were on the trajectory.
This is actionable, right? Like, this is about families coming together, we're just acting sort of as the conveners to bring families together, then to discuss what they want to bring back to their school communities and advocate for, and to sort of build a network, hopefully, of support for one another which I'm always a fan of, right? Like of building sort of cross ward and cross city networks. So that's, I think, the strength of this option. The two strengths, right? It's in our purview and it's actionable, and it's really sort of just in terms of capacity. I may be, I haven't dug to the next level of like what would happen after they go back to their schools. Do we follow up? But I think our input would be minimal, actually. We would be there sort of keeping notes on what they're coming up with and supporting as we can.
Okay.
But I think it's
mainly,
yeah.
so we're going to do both. We're going to build this plane while flying it. Can we get a deadline for like when, or not deadline, can we get when we would like to assemble this body? And then in the interim between us and the board, presenting these, we have a working session coming up, presenting this information to say like, hey, board members, we're going to have this body of parents who are going to work on things that the State Board of Education can actually move the needle on, / also building up parent advocacy on issues. But I think we need to set like a target of like, should this be like a March thing or to start it? I know January, February, we're trying to get back into the swing of things. It's also cold, and I don't take off the cold factor. I'm not sure people want to meet in person. So I think we should like, so that if we set like we want to start this body at this date, we know we need to start moving the needle to get ourselves ready to.
I think spring makes sense to me, but I'd want to hear from John Paul and staff what makes sense in terms of capacity again. I mean, I do think that going to the next year, we don't have a set work plan, I don't think. So maybe that is a plus here, but just in terms of like having something where families can then start the new school year actually ready to advocate or do whatever it is they decide is important to do based on this study group. It would be great to start, say, in March, and then you would be ready in August to start organizing families in your school or whatever it is you want, whatever the action is that they come up with. So that would be my proposal, I guess. Other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have, I'm the devil's advocate.
Yeah, that's good.
When we're talking about families in schools, I would like to know what kind of, like you brought it up earlier, about what kind of organization, because when we're talking about LEAs, we're talking about one huge LEA and however many 100 small LEAs, right? And they're all doing something different. None of them are doing the same thing as far as parental engagement, family engagement. I would like to find out what the smaller, we know DCPS has a parent council. That'd be what they do. But I would like to know what the charter LEAs do before we find out. I mean, just know what, we have to know what the beast looks like before we start playing with it. And
John Paul.
I apologize. I'm gonna have to run to a new meeting, and I just wanted to go back really quickly to the potential statement for the COVID. I've drafted something up. If everyone can just look at the chat real quick, just to make sure that the four of you agree with this text, I'll send it out to the full board members. That way we can continue working on it. I apologize for interrupting the agenda.
That last sentence, families are worried that the end to the mandate in the public sphere, but maintaining it in our schools, that should probably be a comma after schools, does not provide enough protection for children, especially that. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yep.
I would almost say, sorry, jump in, I know you're quick. I would say that last one, I would say reevaluate, because I'm going by my experience when we took off the mask that last May, and all these numbers shot up and we could barely start school we started it, but you know how that went. But maybe to reconsider or seek engagement with the public around the new year. Yeah, because maybe we'll have more information. It's safer to be indoors. I would say wait until it gets warm again. But
so just to make sure that I'm clear, so that last sentence you wanted to change from reconsider to reevaluate the ending the mandate until the new year.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought in my head I was reading it as lifted January 1st. Reconsider until the new year to provide additional time for, maybe that does cover it. I was just in my head, I read that as like January 1, I was reading this, push it back until January 1, but reconsider covers that. Thank you. Maybe
I think it has to be past I think it has to be at least the middle of January, because you're talking about everybody's coming back from the Christmas holiday. And that's where the biggest uptick in.
Yeah, so that's why on the sentence before that, I called out weeks and said 6 to 8 weeks, because 8 weeks from now would be end of January.
Good.
So I was thinking by putting it in the sentence before that, it would imply it in the next sentence that what we're talking about is sometime after the was it President's Day holiday in January?
Yeah, I agree.
Anything that I missed? Anything you want to change before I go ahead, Emily?
Just going back to what Rep. Reed was saying before about the equity piece. Do we want a sentence in there, maybe after the, especially those under 5, and maybe another sentence after that about our hardest hit communities? This is in consideration also of our communities, especially east of the river, who are hardest hit by the pandemic, and I don't know, something like that.
What about in that sentence, the state board believes strongly that vaccination is the most powerful tool we have to combat the continuing pandemic, especially in areas of the city that have been hardest hit?
Something like that. I don't know. Do others feel I just think, that is something, again, we've decided to keep on our as part of our value add is that we really frame everything through that lens.
Yeah. And I think, the thing is, like, it's the vaccination rates. Like, we're going the lens of the rates. It's is
That's a good point.
Is it more time for folks to get, or is it's I just think we should consider like the choices that people are making. And I think those numbers are showing there's a sentiment.
So for this statement, what are you suggesting that we add then to make that clear?
I'm gonna pull Ebony Rose, help, please. I do think we should acknowledge that there's a population that, vaccination isn't be all end all for them. And I'm just gonna put that on the table.
Yeah.
I do think I highlighted that sentence Fraser mentioned because it's a little funky. I do think families are worried about the ending of the mandate. I do think we should be honest in sharing that, the majority of our kids we have a big chunk of kids that live 7 and 8. Like we have the most kids and we have the lowest vaccination rates, period.
Yeah.
So and when I think about, I do think the framing around what this means for kids is particularly important, kids in schools, because anything else is too far away from what we should be paying attention to. And so I do think there is a equity question here when there comes to families and like what this means and where it will probably hurt people the most.
Did you look at the thing that's in there? Oh, Emily put
thing?
it on there.
Is that kind of what you were getting at?
Yeah, I think I would say vaccination rates maybe continue to lag. And I think it's important to say, like, the SBOE recognizes that there are, honestly, it's in our East of the River communities. And we should state who is in those communities. Like, it's Black residents, it's poor residents, it's a lot of families. Vaccination rates continue to lag there. And you know, we have to keep those residents safe.
There are communities where vaccination rates are lower. And where masks, forget the therefore, where masks play an important role in keeping the residents and especially the children safe.
Are we
How
going
about
to
that?
11:30?
How about that many of our communities have low vaccination rates?
Now, I
Or
think we should be specific which
specify,
communities they
yeah.
are. Like, it is, yeah, like
5,
it
7,
is.
and 8.
It's not just, it's Ward 4, it's half of
Yes.
Ward 4 too.
I know. Ward 4 is.
I mean, Ward 4 is up there.
So
Well,
how do
should say
we,
that, but we should say Ward 4 too. We should say 4, 5, 7, 8, or whatever it is. I think it matters because honestly, if it was Ward 2, it would be a different conversation because Ward 2 doesn't have a bunch of kids. And I'm pushing being specific because I think it's important that we chime in on a perspective of what this means for kids in schools. If it was like, okay, this is, you know, it matters because it is the population of kids that we care about. So like we should say Ward 4, we should say Ward 5, we should say Ward 7, we should say Ward 8 because those wards are highest in families. Like that's important.
And schools.
Right.
You all
and
have the
schools.
highest number of
That's
schools, like,
important.
but far and away. Yeah.
Good points. I thank y'all for
Where the vaccination rates.
do that.
I'm gonna put one more version of that sentence in the chat. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
Why now? It's such odd timing. Who pushed that? I'm just really curious, like where that came from. It's always a mystery, man.
What's that?
Just the decisions, like these announcements when they just come out of the blue, and you're like, what?
Oh,
Where
you know
did
how
that?
she does it? That's how she
Like,
does it.
but who said that? Was it like some business owner or something? Like,
Of course. Come on now. It's a gym. It's that gym that Ebony Rose doesn't go to.
Not anymore. People in the gym have cooties. They were not wiping down the machines pre-pandemic.
Ooh,
yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
So-
I was gonna say that happened before pandemic. That was
So just to confirm,
Yeah,
does,
Paul has to go. Okay.
does
go ahead.
does the new sentence reflect what we're talking about?
The vaccination rates.
and where the vaccination rates are lower and where masks
Rather than
play
vaccine,
an
rather than
important
vaccine
role in
rates.
keeping- Yeah,
the
I think that's right.
vaccination rates.
I
Right.
think
Because if
that's-
it's not a vaccine rate, I'm just,
Vaccination rates. Got it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I changed that one. Does that reflect the equity pieces that we're looking at?
Yes.
yeah,
Yes, thank
yep, that's great.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and send this out to the full board now, and I'll text everyone asking them to review it. I'm going to put a deadline by 3 p.m. today for everyone to weigh in,
Great.
and hopefully
great.
by then we'll be able to get something out. Madam Chair, I don't want to necessarily go back to interrupt your conversation about the
Go ahead.
parent thing either. I do want to reflect on what Vice President Gassoy said related to capacity. We're there in terms of staff. Like, I don't have a lot of resources left to be able to devote to a new thing until after January. So we have some time, I think, now to sort of think about it between you all to think about how we're going to approach this. What's the right way to do that? I will also be very candid. I'm very concerned with the Parent Advisory Committee because I am very worried that it's just going to be an opportunity for white privileged parents to speak over those voices that we're not already hearing. And so I'm very concerned in how we approach this, whether we do this through an application process, appointment process. Do we do select people? Like, what are the biases that come into those conversations? And so I want to reflect a little bit on that concern. I'm just putting it out there. Like, that is one of my biggest concerns about going forward with something like this. Not that I don't want to hear from the parents, because I do. I just want to make sure that if we're creating a vehicle for this, that it doesn't become the only thing that we listen to, or that we're being very active in finding the voices that we're not hearing. And I don't know that coming to another meeting is the way to do that.
We
Yeah.
also had that same problem
I'm sorry.
when we were doing the teacher advisory committee. Okay, and that was the thing that when you brought it up, Carlene, at the beginning, I was just thinking about, because we have a lot of parents that are really active, but the parents that aren't active are the ones that you need to hear from.
Mhm.
And they're not active because they don't get the message, or they don't have time to meet, or things like that. We have to outreach to them. And it's just like when John Paul is talking about I've always been saying, ever since the pandemic started, the biggest problem we have is trying to get messages to parents on the internet, because the parents aren't looking at messages from DCPS or from their LEAs. I mean, the majority of them, a lot of them don't even know how to use their computers. If you put a message out saying, if you call by 12 o'clock this afternoon, you'll get a $20 bill, there'd be a whole lot of people that wouldn't get the $20 bill because they wouldn't get the message.
Dr. Zoe?
And
Yeah.
that was the biggest problem we had with the teacher advisory committee.
Yeah. No, I know it's sort of an ongoing problem everywhere. I mean, it's there are families that are kind of hardwired seemingly to, be first everywhere and to be the loudest. But here's two thoughts. So again, going back to that first option, and you all, I think maybe the thing to do is just to leave that document with you and you can look at it, but should I share again? What do you want to go back to that? Is that helpful? What I was going to say is,
no, I'm like,
go ahead.
No, because I know we're really ending at 11:30. So I do know our homework is to review that document and underlines that we were talking about. And I think if we can dedicate some time during our working session to talk about as a board, both what it could look like, and then also the point that John Paul put on the table about, how do we make this with a variety of voices. Again, it's worth hearing more board feedback.
Right. So what I was just going to say is one way of doing or addressing what John Paul raised is the OSCE guidelines are really focused on Title I schools. So we could just focus on Title I schools. I mean, that is part of, it would make sense. It would be logical in that frame. And then and making it action oriented, which is something you raised, Representative Reed, I think also addresses to some extent the risk of making this just another, body that comes together, talks, and then leaves, and we're like, okay, that was nice. We don't want to waste people's time. So I do think framing this as like, this is your working group, you come up with, the issues that you want to work on, and we are here to listen and support, is kind of how I am thinking about it and proposing it. So, and like I said, John Paul, what I was thinking would make sense is spring. So in terms of timeline and capacity, so that's just sort of throwing that out there. But I put all those questions at the bottom of that document I shared. So yeah, I like the idea of maybe having our homework be to review that and then maybe offline have a conversation so that at the next working session, we can talk about it.
Can we get the information about the LEAs and what they have as far as a parent organization?
I don't know. I mean, is that something staff could do? Or is that, I mean, my thought, Fraser, was that was something the parents would do when they come together, is they would talk about actually.
I need to
this
know
is-
that. I mean, if you're going through that ESSA guidelines, then I want to know. I mean, if it ain't broke, we don't have to fix it.
It is
There
broke.
may, but there may,
That we
no,
know.
but there may be some LEAs that have really fabulous parent organizations that could be resources. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Oh, so that like we could actually reach out to them. Yeah. Go on, Jeb Paul.
I mean, I think one thing to specifically note related to that list is, I think we do have a list. It's probably a couple years out of date, but we can look at it related to the parent teacher organizations at various schools and LEAs. I mean, I think there's a lot of difference, right? And I think this is one of the points that was made too, is like, there's a lot of difference between a PTO, a PTA, a, you know, parent organization and those types of things. I mean, there are very, you know, some legal differences, and there are also engagement differences in how individual schools decide to engage parents. And I think that's fine. I think the question for us though is really it is great that those organizations exist, but that's not the type of work that our PAC would be doing, right? We're looking at having a PAC for statewide education policies. So how they interact is probably not as helpful, or what they're interacting on at the school level is probably is very different than what we would be asking our parent group to potentially get involved with.
I'm going to move us to our last topic because we have about 15 minutes. And that's basically thank you, John Paul, because I think that's great framing about state policies. What to do with safe passage. So we got the letter to a few people. During our working session, Dan, the student advocate, Dan Davis, chief student advocate, provided an update, kind of like what to do next, how to spend our time. Yeah, any thoughts about what should be next steps with that work?
I think we have to define what safe passage is. Because remember we talked about at the last meeting, I guess, or maybe the business meeting, about safe passage from first period to second period, safe passage from going to school and coming from school. And those are two different kinds of problems, but they both have to do with passage. They're both creatures of passage.
I like that plug. It's a book that Fraser keeps pressing me to read for those.
That's right. It's a fabulous book. But the thing is that's because, I mean, I'm still hearing stories about that the fighting is going on in buildings because it's gang related. In our neighborhoods in Ward 4, at Roosevelt and Coolidge, a lot of the violence is gang related that didn't exist during the pandemic when the students weren't in school. And so they're bringing beefs into the building. That it's I heard from a Ward 6 school, Eastern, the other day, because I have one of my friends is a teacher there, that the violence in the school has really died down. Okay, it hasn't died down at Roosevelt or at Mendoza. So I don't know what, but that's a safe passage problem. What's going on, you know, because it's coming into the building. And then the other problem is what happens when the kids leave Roosevelt and go to the Pittsworth subway, which is about 4 blocks away. And what about that passage? So I think we need to define it. I'm sure that Dan could help us with the definition
And I'm thinking Representative Thompson always reminds us that this work came from students. And then, even in the report from Dan, 300 some odd students were surveyed in a pandemic year, which I think is pretty significant. I know one of the previous reports had like 700 students when we were in session, in person for the most part. But still, so maybe it could be something like define it and maybe reach out to our student advisory council to collaborate on that work if they have room in like their agenda and schedule, so we can keep students.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, cool. So I think and I think that's also, to your point, Fraser, define it was something that Dan in his presentation mentioned as like recommendations for next steps. So I think that will align our work. Does anybody else have any ideas about that? If not, we can.
I guess hasn't it been defined by Dan's office and by others working on this?
Well, he said we need to define it in his.
Okay, Dan said that. Oh, okay.
And
Dan said that.
during our public meeting, during his.
I missed that. Oh, well, there you go. That's a good task for us then. I agree.
Cool.
And I think, engaging our student council, I think they'll be all over that. It is also something parents could be, and this is something you'll see in the document. Another proposal was to focus on either one of our work streams that's already in progress, or one of our focus, advocacy issues like safe passage. And parents are very concerned with this. So this might be something that would really draw parents in to do problem solving and just informing us on what is happening on the ground. So it's another thought, is like bringing parents' voices in as well. So whether it's through a advisory body or just some other way.
Cool. Yeah, that helps make that recommendation come to life whenever we review it. So thank you. With that.
The other thing that touches everything that we've been talking about is we have secondary schools and we have elementary schools. And those are completely different universes. So that the safe passage problem for an elementary school is completely different than that for a secondary school. And the parent involvement in elementary schools is completely different than it is with secondary schools. So we can't even lump that together. When you're having an engagement meeting with parents, and there are elementary school parents or there are secondary school parents, like my wife, as you know, was a Head Start teacher. We spoke a completely different vocabulary. We didn't look at school the same at all. When she would talk about what was going on in her classroom, I could project those students to being high school students and they had the same problems, but it's not the same problem on the ground. So we got to do that. We got to look at, like Emily knows, she's an elementary school parent. All right. I did 5 students who went all the way through college or whatever. And it was completely different at certain levels. The needs are different.
Gotcha. Rep. Gassoy.
Well said. I would say they're different in the school, but in terms of the corridors, outside of the schools where kids are traveling and families are traveling with kids, elementary age kids, they are together, like they're on buses together, or they're like walking to school and cross paths. I'm just thinking of the Ward 1 corridors between Cardozo through Columbia Heights to, Tubman is in that check. So just want to like point that out, that like families, I have been hearing from elementary school families about like that passage and bullying, not from older kids, mind you, but I am just thinking about the transportation piece. They're all together on there. So that is, I think, I think those things are separate, the outside and inside. And I appreciate you sort of raising that as like both of those are part of the safe passage. So.
No, that's a great point. The bullying part, especially, because the bullying part, I would imagine the unsafe passage is like 50% bullying at all levels.
unsafe passage. I like that term you've coined there. So cool. Well, thank you all. I think we agree like that the next step is working with Dan, working with our students as to define safe passage. And then as we're reviewing parent, what we want the role of our parent advisory council to be, you know, if it's going to be, is it state level policies, if it's going to be advocacy, it's going to be a little both. And I'm looking forward to the notes from our staff members because we have a lot of good to-dos. Fraser, thanks again for the push on getting that letter out. And I thank our staff and John Paul for literally building a plane while we were flying in the meeting and getting some language out there that reflects, you know, what we have seen previously in the pandemic with our schools. But also has the equity mindset around like, what do we actually see in our communities? And, you know, calling some things so that we can, you know, raise the values and raise the perspective of our extended neighbors. So thank you all. Enjoy your weekends.
This was a great meeting.
Yeah.
We covered a lot of ground.
It really did, really did.
So
And
thank
it's,
you all.
and you know, and it's all about advocacy. And we're sending out a letter that's outreaching.
Yeah.
What more
Like, boom.
Okay.
Right.
Right.
Makes me feel so productive today already. We got that letter out.
The next time you see me, I probably won't have any scars.
What happened, Fraser? Unsafe passage?
I guess we
What-
can stop the
It
recording.
was very unsafe.
yeah.
I tripped and fell on the sidewalk and
Oh,
didn't break anything.
good.
Thank God I landed on, I guess I landed on I had a little bump on my head here.
Were you
I
wearing your
didn't-
glasses?
Yeah, my glasses cut my cheekbone.
Oh my
It's not
God.
bad. No stitches, nothing. Everything's fine.
Sheesh.
I had my daughter, the veterinarian, and the rest of the nurses were there taking care of me. So I went to lunch with them and had a ice
Okay.
pack on my head.
Well, be careful. Sheesh. I didn't even notice till
No,
now you mentioned it.
You know, I guess that's what 77 is like. I've got to be
Alrighty.
more careful.
Thank
See
you.
y'all
All right.
later.